Okay, this is part 6. Secured conditions. After my private meeting with Sigiswald, I explained to Sylvester and the others what the royal family had told me, namely that they had thought they were treating Airfest especially well. There had been plenty of misunderstandings at work between us, but they hadn't simply wanted to dump the entire burden on us. So I believed that there was still room for negotiations. Next, I reported that the royal family was going to hold another dedication ritual on the last day of the Archduke Conference, and that I had put forward our conditions, assuming they wanted to adopt me on good terms. I also made sure to mention my repeated reminders that I was merely expressing my own opinions, and that the Ob had the final say. I wanted Sylvester and the others to recognize my efforts to avoid a repeat of the mess last year. Sylvester must have been irritated that after failing to secure his agreement, the royal family had attempted to go behind his back by obtaining my approval instead. He praised me for blocking them and stressing that the final decision was not mine to make. Not long after my debrief, Sylvester received another summons from the royal family. He was to meet with them again in 2 days' time. "All right, Rosemont," Sylvester said upon his return. "Tell me exactly how you negotiated with the royal family." We were in a meeting room without Florencia or his retainers, and he looked unmistakably angry for some reason. His eyes narrowed. He started grinding a finger into my cheek. "Pooey?" "No, this time we had our meeting without retainers so that we could speak more clearly. And guess what I discovered? You were unbelievably rude to Prince Sigiswald in the archive, weren't you?" I cocked my head at Sylvester, unsure why he was scolding me. "I told you that I was blunt with Prince Sigiswald since he promised not to punish me for stating my opinion. Was he really so wounded that he found it necessary to complain to you? That's not very manly of him." "No, he wasn't complaining. He wanted me to warn you not to take the same tone with anyone else, since he was confident that you would. The stress of listening to him made my stomach ache." "Is he really? So he really isn't manly." "If we had agreed to speak as nobles, then even I would have had the common sense to be more discreet. Sigiswald had told me to be blunt, so it was kind of messed up that he was now complaining about it. To return to your original request, I said, yes, I did push for the royal family to host another dedication ritual. That was only to buy us some time, though, and I don't believe I did much else that could be described as negotiating. Bear in mind that I did not have the authority to make any actual decisions. At most, you could say that I threatened them a little to ensure they would spare Ferdinand." "Hold on just a moment," Sylvester exclaimed, his hands on his head in disbelief. "I just assured Prince Sigiswald that you didn't threaten him, that he must have misunderstood you since you would never resort to such means, but he was right?" I felt kind of bad knowing that Sylvester had worked so hard to defend me, but indeed the prince was correct. My threats were entirely deliberate. No matter how much concern I showed for Ferdinand, nobody in Arensbach would treat him as family. Prince Anastasius even told me that I would need to take matters into my own hands. Asking the royal family to help him through normal means did not work, so I was forced to make use of the rare opportunity that the archive afforded me. Had that conversation taken place anywhere else, in the presence of others, I would have been executed. Is that not true? Being in the archive had allowed me to speak my mind. Of course, if my efforts ended in failure, I would need to think of some other means to accomplish my goal. In any case, Sylvester said, the royal family understood you loud and clear, so you don't need to worry about it anymore. Hope swelled up in my heart. They accepted my request for Ferdinand to receive better living conditions and not be deemed guilty by association? Sylvester responded with a tired nod. Yeah, they said they would order Arensbach to give him a hidden room. Yes, and the other conditions? They approved more or less every single one in a way. I'm pretty sure that's all thanks to you. He went on to tell me how the rest of the meeting had proceeded. The first time he was summoned, they had only used an area affecting sound blocking magic tool, but this time they had spoken alone without any attendants or guards present, and used individual sound blockers. Then, in this extremely contained environment, the thoroughly exhausted royal family had gone through my conditions, made sure they were accurate and properly understood, then confirmed that everyone was on the same page. Sylvester continued, as far as I can tell, the royal family is pretty divided when it comes to how to deal with you. Trollqual, for example, believed that anyone who obtained the Gruterscheid deserved to become the next Zent, and that they would need to be obeyed without question. In his eyes, preparing a villa and such for me was an absurd misplacement of priorities. He instead maintained that I should be welcomed into the royal palace as the country's next queen, while he moved into a villa instead. Wow, dude! You're just ready to get on the throne right then and there. Well, I mean, considering all the stress he's under and everything, I can understand it. If it's someone who can actually do it better than he could, yeah, of course. He also believes that one is best served making one's own faction, Sylvester informed me, and that Zents need to surround themselves with people they can trust. That is precisely why he opened our first meeting with an offering to accept as many Arenfest nobles into the sovereignty as possible, and was shocked when we declined. There was also the matter of my marriage. Everyone knew that engagements were a crucial means of creating new factions, so while Trollqual wanted to adopt me for the sake of obtaining the Gruterscheid, he would refrain from getting involved afterward. He apparently believed that the new Zent should rule Jurgen Schmidt as they saw fit. That all sounds very nice, I replied, but would that not boil down to King Trogcold dumping his burden on me? Prince Sigistwald seemed to feel the same way. He said that simply obtaining the Gruchite wouldn't be enough for someone to rule. Because I was from Ehrenfest, I wouldn't have much authority to speak of. Would I be able to rely on the Greater Duchies to help me? Nor would I be able to rely on the Greater Duchies to help me. I doubted that Trogcold would do much to support me either, since he was so against getting involved with my rule. These facts had spurred Sigistwald to ask a very important question. How much could a mere student really be expected to do with just the Gruchite? Abandoning me to rule on my own wasn't an option. That was why he had instead proposed that I marry into the royal family after my adoption. It would introduce the least discord, allowing me to depend on them as well as their existing support base. Even then, Trogcold had refused to budge. Your position is sound, but we do not have the final say on this matter, he had said. The next Zent must decide our fates. You agree to Prince Sigistwald, I'm told, Sylvester remarked to me. I simply believe that if they're willing to accept my terms, marrying him is the least I can do. According to Sylvester, and perhaps unsurprisingly, Anastasius had disagreed with both his father's and brother's positions. He said that obtaining the Gruchite and the authority of a Zent would not give you the political aptitude necessary to rule a country. Until then, he had seemed to be of one mind with Prince Sigistwald, but after that, yes, what did he say? Well, in his own words, we cannot entrust Jürgen Schmidt to such a book-obsessed, maladapted gremlin. Her temple-born customs would clash with our own, and society would descend into chaos. For all our sakes, we must take the Gruchite from her as soon as possible. Let me tell you, King Trogcold dragged him over the coals for that. I mean, that was rude, but he was not wrong. Anastasius had gone on to say that if taking the Gruchite from me was an option, he would ease the country's frustrations toward Ehrenfest by having me serve the sovereign temple as its high bishop until my coming of age. Then he would allow me to return home. If taking the Gruchite from me wasn't an option, he would propose that they hide my status as Zent, make me Sigistwald's third wife, and confine me to a library whenever my assistance wasn't needed. That, he said, would be the most peaceful solution. I have to agree on that one. That probably would be your most peaceful solution on that one. In response, Trogcold had scolded Anastasius for being so disrespectful to the next Zent, and subsequently forbidden him from speaking to me in the underground archive. King Trogcold stated that he would do his utmost to follow Ehrenfest's request, Sylvester said, but he also very apologetically asked if you could, as the next Zent, be more considerate of the sovereignty's budget and the state of its treasury. Is that somehow relevant to Ehrenfest? Sylvester glared at me. You asked for your own extravagant bookroom, didn't you? In a shocking twist, the bookroom I requested would cost an absolute fortune, and the royal family was agonizing over what to do. The other conditions have been trivially easy to meet in comparison. Your bookroom was the only condition that the royal family could not agree to, Sylvester continued, so Ehrenfest agreed to give up on it. No! You gave up on the one thing I told you I wasn't going to budge on. That's so mean. My bookroom! I screamed until there was no more air in my lungs and clutched my head, started gasping for breath, and glared at Sylvester with tears in my eyes. I worked so hard during the meeting with Sigistwald, we hadn't figured out what mattered to me most. Sigistwald, you colossal dummy! Quiet down, Rosemary. It was a decision to be made between the Zent and me. Accept it. You said that you would obey any conclusions we came to, did you not? I did say that! That makes me the colossal dummy! Then they'll allow you to visit the palace library and their various archives as you please. So it's not like you won't have any books at all. Plus, the other conditions were far more important than you getting to have your own bookroom. We can thank your ridiculous request for the fact that they were all accepted, but come on, give it up. The royal family looked completely drained. Sigistwald had arrived at the underground archive expecting a classy conversation with a noble, only to come face to face with an unwavering merchant and receive a firm dressing down for not being on the same page as Ehrenfest. The encounter had apparently made him lose confidence in how other people saw the royals, among other things, and the report he had subsequently delivered to his family had made them all cradle their heads in agony. The royal family had clear reasons and public-facing excuses to hold a dedication ritual on the last day of the Archduke Conference. They also had handwritten instructions detailing how to perform it, courtesy of yours truly. So their only concern would need to be changing everybody's schedule. Even then, they had so very much to gain from the ritual that it was worth being a little bit pushy to make it happen. Yeah, they would get all that mana. So yeah, of course. Still, there was only so much that the royal family could manage. Ehrenfest's demands had largely made sense given its situation, and our request for Ferdinand to receive better living conditions hadn't been too unreasonable either. My bookroom was the sole exception. It simply wasn't feasible no matter how they tried to approach it. In the first place, what were you even thinking by asking for your own bookroom? Is it not normal to have one in one's home? There were bookrooms in Ehrenfest's temple and castle, and the Ehrenfest dormitory had a dedicated reading corner. Ferdinand also had a library in his estate, though that was now mine to love and cherish. Quote unquote. A villa fit for the adopted daughter of a king would surely have a bookroom at the very least. Leaving Ehrenfest would require me to give up the library so that Ferdinand gave me, would it not, I asked? Was it really that strange that I wanted a new one as compensation? It seems unthinkable that the quality of one's life should worsen after being adopted by the king. It makes my head ache that you equate your quality of your life to books, but in any case, they'll prepare somewhere for you to store the books you already own. Just take whatever you want from Ferdinand's library. Excuse me? It's my library. The handover has already taken place, thank you very much. Well, whatever. Sylvester waved away my complaint uninterested. Just don't drain the country's budget with your book-related demands. I never intended to. If a newly made library was too much to ask for, then I would have been fine with Prince Sigiswald giving me his. That was what Ferdinand did, right? You're equating your husband to be giving you a bookroom as from Ferdinand giving you a bookroom. What are you saying that, you saying something? I just want new books to read. My future husband allowing me to share his would suffice even. The shelves could easily have been filled with transcriptions of the Palace Library books, so... Ferdinand, are you the reason she's like this? Sylvester muttered to himself, shaking his head. He then looked straight at me and said, Rosemite, a little tip. Very few people own as many books as Ferdinand once did. Prince Sigiswald, for example, only borrows books from the Palace Library. He's never bought one to keep. Can you imagine, then, how many books the royal family would have needed to buy to fulfill your request? Trying to match Ferdinand's collection would bankrupt Jurgenschmidt. The strength drained from my body. I wouldn't obtain any new books from moving to the sovereignty? This is awful, just awful, I groaned. How can that man call himself a prince when he doesn't own a single book? He's crushing the dreams of little girls everywhere. On top of that, he already has 2 wives. How am I supposed to make my heart throb for him? I mean, he can't even make a single library to propose me with. The heck are you saying? Sylvester griped. He was baffled, but this was a matter of grave importance. Wilfrid told me I could do as I pleased with the Ehrenfest dormitory's bookshelf. Wilfrid told her that. Yet an actual prince can't promise me a single book. I can't believe I'm having to give up on my bookroom, even after I suggested moving into the palace library. The quality of my life wasn't the only thing on the dead decline. So was the quality of my fiancé. This is a nightmare. It hadn't even crossed my mind that being adopted into the royal family would cost me so much. I'm stunned, I said, depressed even. Prince Sigiswald is the biggest disappointment of my life. In an instant, my scant few reasons to be optimistic about moving to the sovereignty had been completely obliterated. I had planned to spend the next year devoted to my handover duties, content in the knowledge that a new bookroom awaited me, but now my motivation was swirling down the drain. Swoosh. I'll still go since they promised to improve Ferdinand's living conditions and spare him from punishment, but I don't want to. A deep sigh escaped me to think I'm going to lose my library. Drop it already. They might not provide any new books, but they'll at least make the room for you. And you have that book deposit system, right? We'll send you the ones we make here, and your shelves will start filling up in no time. What's the difference? My move would introduce a considerable delay between the books being made and them ending in my hands. In other words, I was still going to be worse off. How was he unable to grasp something so simple? Anyway, that's enough about books, Sylvester said. What's done is done. We need to discuss the other decisions that were made. Listen closely, since this is going to determine how you should approach these things. His unilateral decision to move the conversation along frustrated me, but there was nothing I could do. No amount of complaining from me would change an agreement made between the king and an archduke. My shoulders slumped. I could only allow Sylvester to continue. The royal family will oversee another dedication ritual as he suggested. Then, with the surplus of mana under their belts, King Trorakol and Prince Sigiswald will spend the next year trying to obtain the Gruterscheid. If their attempts end in failure, they will adopt you as planned. Not even the slightest trace of a smile remained on my lips. Or my face. If they do obtain the Gruterscheid without me, will they still meet our requests? As payment for our help in the underground archive, they will grant Ferdinand a hidden room and ensure that he is not punished alongside his fiancée. That's all. That's all though. And while they're going to make an attempt on their own, they expect it to be a formidable task, if not an impossible one. King Trorakol is only encouraging it because he believes the royal family shouldn't rest on its laurels and expect a student from the duchy to do everything for them. Well, if our Ferdinand-related conditions were still going to be met, that was fine with me. I didn't want to move to the sovereignty in the first place, so the resolve was much appreciated. So much so that I want to shower them with ultra-nasty rejuvenation potions. I won't actually do that, though. They may be effective, but I would definitely be suspected of an attempted poisoning. There's a lot of groundwork to be laid, Sylvester informed me, so our next year is going to be spent preparing. As things stand, I will need to disown you during the next Archduke conference, at which point the king will adopt you instead. On the surface, we will maintain the status quo, but Ehrenfest and the royal family will actually be getting ready for said exchange. He lowered his voice and said, Is that understood? I nodded. That we need to keep this adoption a secret was a foregone conclusion. It was good, though, that Ehrenfest had already taken complete control of its information network, making it much easier for us to keep to ourselves and work in the shadows. We will manage. Sylvester continued, I plan to clear the room of retainers when we discuss this back in Ehrenfest. We can decide who to tell after that. We will need to inform Melkor's and my retainers as well as those in the temple. The handover and their future plans will require some deliberation. Oh, and when will we tell the Gutenbergs? How will we teach their technologies to the sovereignty? Will they only need to visit, as per usual, or will they actually have to move there? We'll need to give them plenty of notice, else the burden will prove too great. My next year was sure to be spent managing the temple, the Gutenbergs, and my personnel. I don't expect things to be easy for the Gutenbergs, but can that stuff not wait until you've been adopted and gotten things ready for your craftspeople? You're already always on my back about not rushing the commoners. I will discuss it with Benno and decide from there. In any case, we will need to approach the sovereign scholars and ensure that the necessary documents are being sent as soon as possible. In the meantime, would you grant me permission to share retainers with Melkor, which you refused to permit before? I am suffering a severe lack of arch-knights at the Royal Academy. Simply traveling between the dormitory and the auditorium was fine with my current squad, but I would need arch-knights to visit the underground archive, and I wanted as much time to educate Melkor's retainers as I could get. It depends on Melkor's answer, but, sure. By the way, although we'll be acting as though nothing's changed for the next year, how do you feel about Wilfried now that you no longer be engaged to him? Despite my best attempts to avoid them, my thoughts about Wilfried came to mind. To be honest, I don't feel anything about our engagement coming to an end. We were always more like siblings than a couple, and we've barely even interacted in quite some time. He didn't even appreciate the ordnance I sent him. Above all else, though, we haven't done any of the rituals necessary for an engagement. Face stones, and we hadn't decided not to start color mixing until we were a bit older. In short, our engagement had been a verbal agreement with the king's approval and nothing more. So just what was going to replace Wilfried, sure, but that was pretty much the only change. I wasn't emotionally invested in either political marriage, nor was I romantically interested in either of my suitors. However, I continued, I do recognize that this change of plans will impact Wilfried. His engagement to me was the only reason that so many chose to overlook his connection to Lady Veronica and the fact that he entered the Ivory Tower. I regret that the future he spent so long working toward is going to be shattered out of the blue, and as a result of a royal decree he has no power to overturn. Yeah, Sylvester murmured in agreement. The picture of a father worrying for his son. He wasn't thinking about me at all, and that realization made me sigh. But you're aware that Wilfried won't be the only one having to endure the life-changing consequences of a royal decree, right? I never intended to leave Ehrenfest, yet here I am, at risk of losing all of my belongings and everyone who's precious to me. And don't forget Ferdinand, who's gone through that already. Wilfried, on the other hand, would get to stay in Ehrenfest. You need only look after him as his father. Wilfried would at least get to stay with his loving family, and that was enough to make me envy him. There was a pregnant pause before Sylvester replied, You're right. A few days later, an invitation from the royal family arrived, and Sylvester formally announced the dedication ritual that was going to be held on the last day of the conference. The nobles let out joyous cries upon hearing that they would no longer need to endure pressure from the other duchies, but they were also surprised to have been ordered to participate as well in order to gain more divine protections. Very few of them had participated in his religious ceremony before. Rosamund's retainer, Sylvester said, I expect you to be there in your blue robes, supporting and protecting everyone through the ritual. Understood. We will only need to show up and perform the ritual on the specified date, so there was nothing for us to prepare. I needed only to continue visiting the underground archive until the last day of the Archduke Conference. So, the royal family is hosting a dedication ritual, Handler said during lunch. I am told that it was made possible thanks to Ehrenfest, who wished to answer the calls of the other duchies and teach them about religious ceremonies. Even we of Dunkelfelger are thrilled to be participating. Ehrenfest must be finding it difficult. I admit, I replied, I did not expect Dunkelfelger to take part. Your research has already demonstrated that one can obtain divine protections to the ceremonies performed before and after dinner games. We are interested in other religious ceremonies as well, it would seem. There are only so many divine protections we can obtain through our dinner get rituals, no? That surprised me. Maybe this was rude, but I never expected those from Dunkelfelger to care about anything other than dinner. Because, I mean, they're always going on about it, right? So, yeah. According to Handlord, the scholars in attendance wanted divine protections from other gods as well. We also want our adults to have another chance to perform the divine protections ritual. My father and mother are currently agonizing over how to involve our lay nobles and men nobles as well, despite them not usually being able to attend the Archduke Conference. Magdalena nodded in agreement. She was listening too, while Hildebrand bemoaned the fact that he could not participate in the ritual. Handler will not be able to participate this year either, Magdalena said chidingly. Some have suggested that it would be incorporated into the Royal Academy's lesson plan, and that Klassenberg and Ehrenfest performed it annually as joint research. Be patient until you enroll. By then, it would already be too late, Hildebrand grumbled. His lips pursed. Will the majority of duchies be participating in the ritual as one might expect, Sandler asked? Magdalena nodded. Indeed, Arensbach has declined, as they have Ferdinand to teach them, but every other duchy has announced its intention to take part. I remember Ferdinand writing that he had traveled around to Arensbach with a group of nobles for spring prayers. Simply having experience with religious ceremonies wouldn't be enough, though. If one wanted new divine protections, they would need to repeat the divine protections ritual. Would it not be wise for them to participate anyway, I asked with a quizzical tilt in my head? Most nobles simply wanted a chance to obtain new divine protections. Magdalena gave me a cold smile, as if she were holding back some much darker emotions. According to Lady Detlindy, they will be able to repeat that trifling ritual as many times as they desire once she becomes Zent. Did she actually say that? Really? 3 times, courtesy of her ordinands. Her retainer's desperate attempts to stop her were included in the recording as well. Dang it. But in any case, the entire royal family was present for it. It might have required me to threaten a prince, but I'm so glad that I managed to save Ferdinand. Oh yeah, definitely. The Archduke Conference's dedication ritual. Herscher made a rare appearance at the Ehrenfest dormitory and gave me a board on which was a list of all the ingredients necessary to make mobile magic tools like Schwartz and Weiss. Lady Rosamund will be participating in the dedication ritual, she said, sounding extra pleased with herself. Do give the Ob my thanks. Her announcement had nothing to do with the board, so I wasn't sure whether to thank her or play along. Thank you ever so much for delivering this, I eventually said. I am also glad to hear that you have been allowed to join the ritual. The first dedication ritual we hosted at the Royal Academy was for research purposes, so only Archduke candidates and student arch scholars had been allowed to participate. This had deeply troubled the research crazy professors who were very much interested in religious ceremonies that allowed one to gain more divine protections. At first, the news that another dedication ritual was going to take place had come as another disappointment to the professors. Only the Obs and their retainers had received invitations. Herscher had grumbled about being left out again, that she had gotten Sylvester to send an ordinance to the royal family requesting that they include the professors as well. I didn't think the royal family would mind. The more participants, the better, after all. I am aware that participants were asked to bring their own rejuvenation potions this time, Herscher remarked. Gundalf was rather frustrated. The students had said that Ehrenfest potions were particularly effective, so he wanted to try one for himself. I giggled. Just as I predicted, Jawanko was thinking about her rejuvenation potions first and foremost. All of a sudden, I noticed a twinkle in Herscher's eye. The royal family wants to make this ceremony a yearly event, but the promise of divine protections and nothing more will surely lead to mounting dissatisfaction. Oh, and why is that? Although having a chance to perform the ritual once every 10 years is fine in itself, one will need to obtain several divine protections before they feel an impact on their mana usage. One must continually offer mana during the ceremony to earn the right to repeat the ritual. But those who receive their chance during the first or second year will receive barely any divine protections. Herscher was correct. How many divine protections one obtained was dependent on how much mana one offered and whether one's regular behavior drew the attention of the gods. It wasn't enough to perform the odd ritual and then proceed with one's everyday life. If one considered the number of divine protections received by my retainers who were visiting the temple every day as part of a silly competition to see who could transform their staff into a divine instrument first, and the number of protections received by Wilfrid, who had performed spring prayer and offered mana to the foundation since I first entered the jury for 5 years ago, it became clear that quality and consistency were tremendously important. She continued, it will most likely be the losing duchies who are made to repeat these rituals first. Their mana is sparse to begin with, and they are unlikely to obtain many divine protections after their first ritual. Then they will need to wait an entire decade before they can repeat it again. Locked into participating over and over for fear of getting left behind. All these years of struggling will doubtless inspire frustration. And so, Lady Rosamund, do you not think you should distribute rejuvenation potions to ease their burdens and turn their painful struggle into a more tolerable one? I considered Herscher's point. It did seem like a good idea to provide an immediate reward to ease the noble's inevitable dissatisfaction. If you believe this is important, Professor Herscher, then I would advise you to say as much to the royal family and suggest that the sovereign professors work together to make those rejuvenation potions, I said, turning her down with a polite smile. At least one of you must have a recipe for a highly effective brew. That is not a problem that Ehrenfest must strive to solve. Herscher shrugged, unamused. You are correct that making rejuvenation potions for the defeated duchies will not be beneficial in the slightest. I would never waste time that I could spend researching on some fruitless endeavor. I agree from the bottom of my heart. Just as you would not want to surrender your chances to be immersed in your precious research, why would I want to fritter away time that I could spend reading? Furthermore, the royal family are the ones holding this ritual. I would not like to intervene. Herscher let out a laugh. So you claim, but it is clear as day that you are devising a solution to their discontent. It would not be the first time you have done something of no apparent value to you. On that note, a rather large change is being made to the Royal Academy's curriculum. You inspired that as well, I imagine. You would do well to understand that your words move the royal family. At this rate, they will want to take you for themselves. And it's kind of too late there. Yeah, her warning. Dang it. Her warning had come too late, but it was a good indication that news of my adoption had yet to circulate. How were the lesson plans changing, I asked. The royal family declared that it would make more sense to obtain one step. After learning mana compression and obtaining divine protections, they wanted to return to the old ways, when students would need to wait until the year of their graduation, but were forced to compromise when an overwhelming number of duchies proclaimed that they would rather the younger generation learn to use their staffs at the Royal Academy than at home. Thus, students will now obtain them during their third year. As it turned out, the students obtaining their staffs sooner made lessons easier for the teachers, so they hadn't protested the event being moved to the first year. Hersher suspected my involvement because the topic had come up so abruptly and during the second half of the Archduke Conference. As much as it hurts, her deduction is spot on. Hersher continued, we were also instructed to revert our lesson plans for the first and second years to what they were before. Gundalf's group is overseeing this with plans to have the process completed in time for the next academic year. The professors had initially opposed the scheduling, arguing that lesson plans couldn't be changed at such short notice, but Farlam had already set a precedent for using the old plans during our second years, that our hands had ultimately been tied. Ha ha! Oh, I guess there are little times when Professor Farlam's little schemes actually benefit the royal family. There was also an inquiry into whether the dedication ritual could be added to the standard curriculum, Hersher informed me. At the moment, many duchies still struggle to visit the temple, but the royal family stated that a degree of competition must be introduced at once. They want the students to experience plenty of religious ceremonies and pray as much as possible during class so that they can obtain more divine protections. The suggestion had actually been rejected since the professors knew next to nothing about religious ceremonies. In the end, it was decided that the new content would be incorporated into the curriculum gradually over a much longer period, and that Ehrenfest and Klausenberg will continue to perform joint research both focused on the dedication ritual. Once the term begins, Ehrenfest will be asked to participate in this joint research, I imagine. It is also my understanding that Klausenberg is helping the royal family get ready for the upcoming ritual so that they may learn the process and make their own preparations in the future. Klausenberg and the royal family both act fast, though I can't imagine Ehrenfest will last for much. I received a report much earlier today that we brought a trial set of our picture book Bibles to the Royal Academy and started promoting them. And then it hit me. I had said that in the past that Ehrenfest will not have any qualms about repeating the ritual as long as Klausenberg took care of the preparations. Hersher gave me a look of understanding. I see that this has already been discussed. It was mentioned that the burden on Klausenberg would plummet when the ritual does eventually become part of the curriculum and duchies start bringing their own rejuvenation potions. Oh, regarding the potions, you may be interested to know that Klausenberg was suspicious of the apparent ease with which Ehrenfest prepared so many. Preparing rejuvenation potions certainly is a handful. Just making them was draining enough, but the biggest complication was gathering materials. Ehrenfest's gathering spot hadn't used to be very abundant, and it seemed reasonable to assume that the other duchies were still dealing with the same problem. They could just regenerate their own gathering spots, but you need to know the prayer for that, so... As I pondered this, Lysletta entered with a warm meal package neatly in a box. Our way of thanking Hersher for actually bringing the board to me and providing so much additional information. She tried to stand near the wall and wait for us to finish our conversation, but the overeager professor gestured her over without delay. Lysletta, if you would, she said, then immediately took the box with a smile. If you'll excuse me, then I must return to my laboratory. Professor Hersher, I stammered, there are still things I must ask you about. Good day to you, Lady Rose. My name will meet again during the Archduke Conference's dedication ritual. Having obtained her food, Hersher turned on her heel and swiftly departed, not even bothering to conclude our discussion. I was left in a daze which made Lysletta slump her shoulders. My apologies, Lady Rosemary. I did not think she would be such a hasty retreat. I should have taken longer to prepare her food. I cannot blame you for failing to realize her intentions. Professor Hersher may teach her at the Royal Academy, but she never behaves as a noble normally should. Now even I had expected her to leave so abruptly. She was too much of a free spirit. I thank you ever so much for your consolation, Lady Rosemary, but I have known Professor Hersher for years now. It was my failure as an attendant that I did not anticipate what she was going to do. That was such a crucial opportunity for you to gather information as well. I get how you feel, but Hersher is outright unpredictable. Attendants aren't mind readers, so what can you do? I continued to translate in the underground archives and spent lunch with Magdalena discussing the royal family's dedication ritual. In no time at all, it was the final day of the Archduke Conference. Despite the suddenness of the whole affair, everything was made ready without incident. After breakfast, I cleansed myself, changed into my high bishop robes, then went with my blue robed retainers to a specified waiting room where we would await the beginning of the ritual. It's Emmanuel! Oh, shit. No sooner had we entered the room than we found ourselves face to face with the sovereign high priest. Shit. I recalled his attempt to cut us off after the Starbind ceremony and was struck with a sudden urge to step away from him out of disgust. But Cornelius placed a hand on my shoulder to keep me in place. He then moved me just a bit to the side behind Hartmut. I gazed up at Cornelius, who gave me a small, reassuring smile in response. He then adopted a more neutral expression and stood next to Hartman. They both stared down Emmanuel, with whom I exchanged the usual greetings before we took the seats offered to us. Lady Rosemine, the Sovereign High Priest, said, I am beyond grateful that we will soon welcome you as our Sovereign High Bishop. That's not happening. Sir Hartman shook his head. As we have mentioned, Lady Rosemine is an Ehrenfest Archduke candidate. There are no plans for her to join the Sovereign Temple. She is only here to carry out a request from the royal family. She then directed the man a chilly smile that practically screamed, Get this through your thick skull already! Yeah, this guy is creepy. This guy is very creepy. Soon after the ceremony concludes, I expect Ehrenfest to receive a royal decree, Emmanuel said, his lips curling, when instructing Lady Rosemine to be sent to the Sovereign Temple to serve as its High Bishop, that is. As I understand, there do exist methods to move an Archduke candidate to the sovereignty, and there will not be anything that Ehrenfest can do to stop it. Hartman looked momentarily surprised, then smirked provocatively. By law, the only way for an Archduke candidate to be moved to the sovereignty is through marriage, but someone who is married cannot become the High Bishop. Were you unaware of that fact, despite being a sovereign priest? Even if she does move, she will never enter your temple. Perhaps those of the royal family intend to take her for themselves. Emmanuel clearly had a limited understanding of noble culture. He had only learned that Archduke candidates couldn't normally be taken to the sovereignty through a conversation with Ferdinand. He stared at us in wide-eyed shock and muttered, The royal family intends to take her. He had genuinely believed that I would start serving as the Sovereign High Bishop once the royal family took action. I mean, they do have ways to cancel my adoption in Ehrenfest, and they did speak to the Sovereign Temple about me joining its ranks. Perhaps he genuinely thought he had a good chance of winning? Midway through the Archduke Conference, however, it came to light that I was a Zent candidate on the verge of acquiring the Gruterscheid. The royal family's focus had then shifted to adopting me instead. They had probably forgotten all about the Sovereign Temple. Everything really did change over the span of this conference. Emmanuel, you should go to the auditorium, I said. You will need to tell the nobles how to enter and arrange themselves. No? I tried to wave him away. His staring contest with Hartman was starting to get annoying, but he instead chose to stay and tell me his complaints about today's ceremony. Lady Rosemine, the dedication ceremony is meant to be performed while facing the shrine, not with everyone standing in a circle. Please ask the royal family to reposition the participating nobles. Indeed, it was standard practice when making an offering to the gods to face the shrine, as dedicating mana would then flow into the divine instrument on the altar. Unfortunately for Emmanuel, that was not our intention for today. We needed the mana for our own purposes, so the nobles involved were to kneel around chalices instead. He continued, filling all the divine instruments will be of enormous benefit to the Sovereign Temple. I have absolutely no intention of providing mana to the Sovereign Temple, I retorted. Harvests all across the country have worsened specifically because you took each duchy's best blue priests and shrine maidens. Is that not true? Well, in this case, I think the Sovereign Temple should return the favor. After the Civil War, the return of the more plenteous apprentices in noble society had caused trouble enough, but the Sovereign Temple's poaching had really wounded the temple of the country's lesser duchies. The state of the blue priests who were left in Ehrenfest said it all. In any case, I went on, if you truly want the mana from the duchies here today to be given to the Sovereign Temple, consult the royal family. They are the ones hosting the ritual, not I. Again, I waved the Sovereign High Priest away and asked that he leave. Hartman and Angelica hesitantly basically forced him out of the waiting room this time. Lenore peered down at me, worried. Are you well, Lady Rosemine? You seem exhausted already. There has been so much on my mind recently that I must be losing sleep. I'm not so tired that I cannot perform the ritual, but I do not have the strength to deal with Emmanuel right now. His lunatic, somewhat unfocused stare almost put me on edge. Just being in his presence was gross and unsettling. It was as though simply facing him drained me of my life force. I hadn't even spoken to my retainers about the fact that I was being adopted into the royal family. Thinking about everything I would need to do upon my return to Ehrenfest was enough to make me sigh. I would need to inform Wilfrid that our engagement was being cancelled, confirm what my retainers intended to do, and train Melkor to take over the temple, and tie up the lower city loose ends on top of that. I also need to write Ferdinand another letter, this time using invisible ink. There's so much he needs to know, like how I secured him a hidden room, and protected not just Ehrenfest, but the entire country. Oh, and our discoveries related to the dangerous silver cloth, and the weird thing Professor Hortensia said to at Linde. Just a ton, I wonder if Sylvester will grant me permission. Lady Rosemond, the participants have all arrived and received an explanation of today's ceremony. As the Sovereign Temple is going to perform it, I shall serve as the High Priest. I gazed up to see Emmanuel. He had evidently come to fetch me while I was lost in thought. He extended a hand to me, but Hartman swiftly smacked it away. It would be much too dangerous for you to act as High Priest, he said with a smile. A blue priest who is not himself a noble could never endure so many Oz making an offering. At best, the flow would completely drain you of your mana. At worst, it would kill you. Even standing on the outskirts would put your life in danger. Hartman carefully wiped the part of his hand that had touched Emmanuel and added in a low voice that while he did not care what fate befell the sovereign high priest, he did not want anything to happen that might trouble me. Then he offered me his hand instead. My eyes flitted between the two men before I eventually accepted it. Indeed, we would not want you to pass away during the ritual, I said to Emmanuel, then turned my attention to my retainers. Daniel, I would ask you to participate by the edge of the circle. Please signal us if the burden becomes too great. Understood. Everyone else, do not participate. Focus on your guard duty. Yes, my lady. Still, with my retainers surrounding me, I made my way to the auditorium. Angelica was behind me, and I could sense that she was paying excruciatingly close detail to Emmanuel's every move. The High Bishop shall now enter, came the expected call, and a bell started to ring. I made my appearance, and the gathered nobles all turned to look at me. They were kneeling atop a red cloth, and in true to the sovereign high priest's complaints, positioned around chalices rather than facing the shrine. They look a bit like a pie chart. Every noble was wearing a cape in their duchy's color, and their donut formation only made the comparison more striking. As far as the ratios went, the greater duchies had more representation, whereas the lesser duchies had considerably less. The weaker one's minor, the closer one was to the outermost rings, so it made sense that the archducal couples were also close to the center. As I walked through the nobles, I heard Daniel stop Emmanuel with a candid, "This is as far as you go." It was best to leave the situation to him. I glanced over at Ehrenfest's ochre capes and spotted Sylvester kneeling at the very front. Florencia was absent rather than beside him, as expected considering her pregnancy. But Karstead and several others of the Knight's Order were keeping watch from outside the circle. Oh, there are sovereign nobles participating as well. A group wearing black capes was in position between the red and blues. They were scholars in attendance, I assumed. The royals weren't going to participate, so they were standing a short distance away from the red cloth, and the nobles kneeling atop it. Surrounding the royal family was the sovereign Knight's Order, as imposing as ever. They were glaring straight at us. I soon arrived at the center of the circle, where there were 2 large chalices and many smaller ones. They hadn't been particularly hard to gather, I was told. While the sovereign didn't have a Giebs, royals other than the Zent supplied mana to their villas, and the surrounding land as Giebs would. I checked the chalices to make sure they contained empty face stones and nodded they would do well enough. But Ehrenfest, Rosemine, the Zent proclaimed, as the representative of all those gathered here today, I thank you for agreeing to cooperate on such short notice. I crossed my arms and knelt in response and placed my hands on the red carpet beneath me. Hartman got on his knees beside me, but my blue-robed guard knights remained standing. I am one who offers prayer and gratitude to the gods who have created the world, I said, then waited patiently as everyone repeated after me. I am one who offers prayers and gratitude to the gods who have created the world. Their voices were mismatched at the start, but gradually aligned, much like during our previous dedication ritual at the Royal Academy. And as per usual, waves of light began coursing down the red carpet into the chalices. Wait, what? Only the Royal Academy's divine instrument is shining. My understanding had been that the ceremonies performed with one step formed pillars of light, while those performed with temple instruments did not, but I was evidently mistaken. Just one of the chalices began to shine crimson, as though declaring itself the only real instrument among a group of phonies. The light shimmered as though it were a flame, then rose up into the air like sparks. It was yet another strange event, completely different from a pillar of light. This is kind of similar to what I saw on the night of Flutrain. As I stared at the spectacle, mesmerized, I heard Daniel say that we had done enough. I took my hands off the floor and gracefully stood up. Everyone, please remove your hands from the cloth, I said. I expect that some of you are reaching the limits of your mana, so let us end the ceremony here. Daniel was a lay noble with the mana of a med noble, but his limit was bound to be considerably lower than that of a noble equipped to attend the Archduke Conference. Even a moderately effective rejuvenation potion would restore him. The Alps already had experience supplying their foundation, so they were entirely unperturbed, and while those who had never participated in a religious ceremony before seemed tired, nobody looked to be on the verge of collapsing. It was more than one could say for the previous dedication ritual. At this rate, they shouldn't have any trouble doing this each year and gaining more experience with ceremonies. Nobody would give too much and shoot themselves in the foot. Isn't it perfect? But as soon as a victorious smile graced my lips, the blue priests and shrine maidens who had apparently been participating by the edge collapsed, unconscious. I could only cover my mouth and utter an oops. I forgot they were here. And wait, if they do this ritual all the time, shouldn't they know their limits? This was a tremendous shock, but I maintained a neutral expression while looking over the nobles and directing those who needed a rejuvenation potion to drink one. The room grew noisier as people began to replenish themselves, but I could still easily speak over them. In truth, this was a winter ceremony meant to fill chalices for the Giebs to then use to wet the earth. If you continue to pray and offer mana to your temples, then your harvest will increase aplenty. The process will even allow you to obtain additional divine protections from the gods. I punctuated my last remark by noting how many divine protections Wolfried received. After listening closely to my explanation, the Zent offered a grave nod. Henceforth, we shall perform a dedication ritual each winter so that our students may gain more experience with the religious ceremonies. Our children will need to pray from a younger age if they wish to obtain these crucial protections. It was proposed that Klassenberg and Ehrenfest will continue to host these ceremonies to progress their joint research, and both duchies have expressed that they are willing. Did we formally agree to that? The matter had come up in the underground archive, but did Sylvester even know about this, or did it count as Academy business and not require his permission? In either case, now that the Zent had announced it, and to such an important crowd, it would be more or less impossible for us to back out. The nobles urged to participate in today's ritual were just as trapped. They all glanced down at their rejuvenation potion pouches with looks that seemed to say, "You intend to continue stealing our mana?" I couldn't help but feel sorry for them. As the Zent has said, it is necessary to perform religious ceremonies not only to obtain divine protections, but also to support Jurgen Schmidt as a whole, like I pronounced. That said, as one round inevitably... Dang it. As one must inevitably follow the ritual with the rejuvenation potion, we understand the burden this will place on the students. Several of the nobles shot their heads up to look at me, mostly those from the losing duchies. Will Airfest distribute rejuvenation potions as it did for the previous dedication ritual, one of them asked? I am afraid not. As I'm sure you can imagine, not even a greater duchy like Klassenburg could readily make rejuvenation potions for the entire Royal Academy. Airfest would stand no chance at all. The hope quickly faded from their eyes, but I couldn't risk putting such a heavy burden on Airfest when there was a good reason that I wouldn't even be there next year. Instead, to make it easier for everyone to know their own potions, or to brew their own potions, I would like to teach you all a prayer that will rejuvenate your gathering spots. Our gathering spots? The nobles looked confused, so I nodded. I would teach them the prayer and nothing more. If they wanted better ingredients, they would need to rejuvenate their gathering spots themselves. That was why we had only squeezed a conservative amount of mana from them at this time. There are mysterious magic circles engraved in the gathering spots granted to your dormitories, I said. If your nobles all press their hands against them and offer your mana as you have done here, then your gathering spots will be replenished with an abundance of materials, so make it easier for you to brew rejuvenation potions, and it will serve as another ritual that you can perform. As the buzz in the room got louder, I faced the nobles and taught them the prayer to Flutrain that was used during spring prayer. Some struggled to hear me over the noise, so I repeated it again and again while stealthily channeling my mana into the not entirely filled chalices. Now the chalice is shining green, someone cried. Oh, my apologies. I was repeating the prayer, so I must have accidentally begun an entirely different ceremony. Whoops. I frantically removed my hands from the now full chalices and put on a smile. That had almost been a gigantic blunder, but adding the extra bit of mana had surely secured me the full year I had bargained for. And so the Archduke Conference's dedication ritual ended with that incident. Before we left, I asked Ehrenfest's adults to rejuvenate our gathering spot. Thanks to their large numbers, this proceeded without issue, which came as quite a relief. I was glad to know that they would manage when I was gone. The epilogue! How much more do we have left? There's the epilogue, and I'm sure there's some side stories. Hold on. 1, 2... Okay, there's only 2 stories. Okay. How far have I gotten? 43 minutes. I only got 2 chapters in this one. Wow. Okay, I guess that the next video is going to be the last 3 chapters, and we will be done with this book! Wow! Okay. I should be able to manage and be eager and waiting and ready for the next book to drop on January 10th, and I should be caught up by that point. I'll see you guys in the next one.